program. Good morning to everyone. Good afternoon. Please, Aya.
Well, good morning again to everyone and good afternoon. Welcome to today's seminar on mastering tough conversations around serious illnesses, sponsored by the Medical Committee of the Partnership Program of the Jewish Agency for Israel. I am Aya Kagadel, the Director of the International Affairs Department here at Galilee Medical Center in Israel, and the Israeli co-chair of the Medical Committee of the Partnership. I want to thank our committee members who promoted this seminar and our American, Hungarian, and Israeli participants for joining us today. A special thank you goes to Harry Berman for initiating this important program and championing the entire process. Before we start, I would like to say a few words about the Partnership Program. The Partnership is a platform for promoting people-to-people relationships through cultural, social, educational, and community-based programs. Our Partnership family has 16 Jewish communities in the central USA, 2 Israeli municipalities, which are Akko and Mate Asher in Western Galilee region in Israel, and Budapest in Hungary. Our partnership is part of the Jewish Agency Partnership Unit, and there are 46 partnerships that engage and connect more than 350,000 Jewish people. Partnership Together is a way to bridge the gap of understanding and bring us together in the spirit of our faith. It not only creates deep interpersonal relationships that transcend location, but it also celebrates our rich heritage, our differences, and the culture that unites us all. Today's seminar will include a presentation by Dr. Jonathan Fisher, followed by conversations and drills in breakout rooms, and end with a questions and answers session. If you have a question, please type it in the questions and answers tab at the bottom of your screen. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. We ask that you please stay on mute to avoid background disruptions. You may also want to go now to speaker view, which you can find in the upper right corner of your screen. And now I would like to invite Dr. Sandy Bidner, my American co-chair of the Partnership Medical Committee, to both introduce himself and to start the program. I wish everyone a pleasant and fruitful symposium. Thank you.
Thank you, Aya. As Aya mentioned, my name is Dr. Sandy Bidner, and I'm a physician who has worked in Central Texas with Baylor Scott and White since 2010. As a lay leader, I have been involved with the partnership for over 20 years, and today I serve as co-chair of the Medical Committee. The Medical Committee creates opportunities for medical personnel from the consortium communities, Budapest and the Western Galilee, to connect on a professional level, promote learning and sharing opportunities between colleagues, and provide the Galilee Medical Center with an avenue to enhance international exposure. During the first 10 years of my involvement, we helped develop a program called Emergency Response Group, or ERG, that brought American physicians and allied healthcare personnel to Galilee Medical Center for 10 days to interact with their Israeli colleagues and participate in a seminar focused on mass casualty events, emergency preparedness drills, in which Israelis had vast experience and expertise and more. We are proud that during this time, more than 200 American physicians traveled to Israel to take part in this program. The Medical Committee has offered and continues to offer the following programs. One is medical externships at Galilee Medical Center, which allow US and Budapest medical students the opportunity for a 1-month clinical rotation at the hospital to learn about Israel, medicine in the Galilee in particular, and Israel in general, and more. Med Together, medical professional exchange program on both sides of the ocean, in which there is an opportunity to broaden professional perspectives while working and socializing with colleagues. Speaker delegations, physicians from the Galilee Medical Center visiting U.S. partner communities, participating, hold conferences and or dialogues for medical professionals and or students, as well as the lay community on topics specific to medicine at the Galilee Medical Center and in Israel. As the American chair of the medical committee, I would like to help develop additional programs that would appeal to American physicians to foster connections and interactions with their Israeli and Hungarian counterparts. During the COVID pandemic, our committee held 4 annual virtual programs for healthcare providers and the broader audience. Thank you for joining us today for this seminar on mastering tough conversations around serious illness. Now, I am happy to introduce you to our dear friend, Harry Berman from Springfield, Illinois, who has worked hard with us to set up the seminar and who will introduce our guest speaker. Harry?
Thank you, Sandy. Shalom to everyone. Thank you both, Aya and Sandy, for your kind comments. I am Harry Berman, volunteer chair of partnership activities in Springfield, Illinois. And I'm very pleased to be able to introduce our speaker today. My background includes teaching and research in gerontology, which is how I happen to be interested in this subject. In terms of Dr. Fisher, he has an appointment at the Duke University Medical School Department of Family Medicine and Community Health, and is the clinical faculty member in the Division of Palliative Care. Additionally, and especially relevant to our seminar, is that he holds the title of Distinguished Senior Faculty Member for both Vital Talk and for the Ariadne Labs. These organizations are at the leading edge of educating physicians about best practices related to communicating with patients and their families regarding serious illness. As a distinguished senior faculty member with these organizations, he conducts trainings across the United States and internationally on this subject. It's been highly informative and a great pleasure for those of us on the planning committee to work with Dr. Fisher over the past several months as we talked through plans for today's session. We're indeed fortunate to have him with us today to lead our discussion. Dr. Fisher, good morning to you. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, good morning. Erev Tov, Boker Tov, Tzarayim Tov, across all of our various time zones. Thank you so much for coming together. It's really a pleasure for me to connect with this group and to have the opportunity to work with you. Just a quick note, I've spent much time in Israel. I spent the year after high school living in Israel, is where I met my wife, who was on the same program through Young Judea, Yudat Zahir. And so half my world calls me Yoni instead of Jonathan, all descended from that time there. So anyway, with that said, and my youngest daughter, who's graduating high school this year, is planning on going on the same program that my wife and I went on a long time ago. So with that said, this is a topic that is near and dear to me. It's one of the things I'm most passionate about in my work, is being able to teach the communication skills related to serious illness. As I was a primary care physician for a decade and a half, and I realized that much of primary care had become trapped in a focus on efficiency. And as I moved into doing more palliative care work, I realized that it was work that allowed me to delve into empathy. And as I had gone into medicine, not necessarily to be efficient, I really found my calling in the world of hospice and palliative care. With that in mind, I'm going to introduce to you a strategy, one particular approach to some of these conversations. And I think it will introduce some skills that you may find useful throughout the continuum of care, even further upstream in conversations or even with your family. So there are some important skills along the way. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and hopefully you'll be able to see that. And I'll do slideshow mode from the beginning. All right, you should be able to see that. Okay, great. So what I'm hoping to do is briefly touch on some of the evidence for having these conversations and really get into more about your role and what are some of the components of what this conversation would be. I want you to think, let's start just by thinking for a moment about some of your own experiences. I want you to try and call to mind a patient, that could be a family member or a patient, who had serious illness, where the outcome at the end of their life was good or bad, and somehow may have been related to the communication that happened or didn't happen as we approached the end of life for that patient. So again, it may have been someone that was near and dear to you, where conversations happened or didn't happen, or someone that you've had experience taking care of. And as you think about that, identify the elements of the communication or lack thereof that you think contributed to the outcome. And as you begin to think about that, if we were to spend time talking about it, you would begin to see some themes emerge. And that, at least particularly in the US system, and I think really in my experience of teaching some groups across Europe as well, that there are patterns where these conversations happen infrequently. We know in the US that fewer than a third of patients with end-stage diagnosis report having end-of-life discussions with their clinicians, kind of not looking ahead. Or they happen very late in the process, where for patients with advanced cancer, that the first discussion they have is only days before their death, with more than half of them happening in a high-stress environment in the hospital, where patients and families might experience a great deal of anxiety while having these conversations. And then this is one of the things that is really a mistake that's endemic to our health system in particular, which is that we focus more on procedures, offering patients like a menu of, well, would you want to be intubated, not be intubated? Would you want to do dialysis, not dialysis, transfusions, et cetera? And we start asking patients to make decisions about things that they really know very little about, instead of talking to us about what it is they know the most about, which is what are they hoping for? What are they worried about? What they know themselves, and then letting our medical expertise connect those values to the procedures that would make sense. So we all too often just offer patients a menu of things to choose from. So our goal is really, instead of just doing some of the things, the right things some of the time for some of our patients, we want to move to a place where we're doing all the right things all the time for all of our patients. We're talking about these goals of care conversations where people get an opportunity to pause and think about, all right, what do I know about what's happening, and what do I want to see happen moving forward with my healthcare? And we know when these goals of care conversations happen, that it leads to increased goal concordant care, meaning people get what they want from the health system. That leads to improved quality of life for both the patients as well as their families. Many people will opt for less invasive or less aggressive approaches. So there are fewer hospitalizations at the end of life. So less utilization of aggressive measures. That leads to lower healthcare costs overall, just as a secondary measure. People are able to access high quality end of life care like we see in hospice earlier in the process. I'm actually working today in one of our hospice centers, and hopefully I'm not going to get pulled away during this, but people should have the access to that high quality care further upstream. And we know that when we give people opportunities to talk about these things further upstream, it leads to better patient and family coping. So the OR, the odds ratio. So we see less ICU admissions, less ventilator use, resuscitation attempts, more utilization of hospice. A third of patients are referred to hospice with less than a week in their life left, whereas really they could have been benefiting for months. And also better caregiver bereavement, better quality of life, reports of feeling better prepared and less regrets. So why is discussing serious illness so hard? Oftentimes we may be meeting patients and families that we haven't met before, particularly if it's in crisis situations. So as clinicians, we don't have a long-standing relationship with them. It may be people coming from all sorts of different backgrounds, cultural backgrounds and belief systems that we may not be familiar with, and they may have different views about things. It can be stressful for patients as well as families, and it can be emotional situations for us as well. And then, as I alluded to before, all too often we focus on treatments rather than values, and that really presents a hindrance. So you see, there's a lot of complex information that we're trying to transmit to patients. There's a lot of emotion involved. So these are complex moments of communication and really take some specific skills in order to navigate. And we know that skills can help us. In the last couple of years, we've really been struck by the increased need for these conversations because people can go from feeling well to having mild respiratory symptoms to suddenly really being acutely ill and deathly so in hospitals. So we know during the COVID pandemic that we've had to have more of these conversations more rapidly. It's also sparked more families to talk about these things. So that's been useful. And we're not as good at these conversations as we think we are. This was a study done out in Seattle, Washington, where they asked a bunch of oncologists about how good they thought they were communicating, and then they asked their patients. And you can see with this scatter plot, there's no correlation between how good the providers thought they were and how good the patients thought they were at communicating, except for this rock star in the upper right corner who thought that, oh, I do really well at this, and patients agreed. And then this poor, I'd say a schlemiel or schlub that they've down here, who's really not doing very well, and the patients would also agree. But otherwise, we really don't have a good sense. We do know that it is a learned expertise, right? That we can start with some basic skills and improve over time to the point that we're able to handle even the curveballs or difficult terrain that could come our way. I'm sure all of you are having some form of these conversations and doing really well with it already. But we know from people like Tiger Woods, right, who may already be experts in their condition, that when they've worked with trainers, they feel like their skills increase. But he says, you know, when I try to implement something new, I'm a little bit off my game for a bit. So I would give you that forewarning. Expect that as you try to incorporate some new skills, it may feel a little bit clunky. You may be off your game for a little bit, but gradually you may find that this helps to add to your expertise. Think about when's the last time you learned a new skill outside of medicine. I know my oldest son tried to learn how to make sourdough bread in the midst of the pandemic, so we all benefited from that. In the process that you go through, you know, you learn about something, you may read about it, and you may pull it up on the internet, you watch a demonstration or a video, and then you would try and practice it. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to follow that same kind of pedagogical approach. But you can't learn this stuff on the fly, really, in medicine. This must have been the time pre-COVID, so no masks in the healthcare system now. But it's hard to learn this stuff on the fly, and just getting lectures and not how you're going to pick up skills. You can't just watch people do these things. And failing, and this is Lindsey Vonn, an Olympic skier, failing is part of the process. So making mistakes is how we can learn, how we can reorient ourselves. And here's what I'm introducing to you today. And hopefully you got an email version of this, you printed out for yourself. This is the Serious Illness Conversation Guide. This came out of Ariadne Labs in a collaboration with people from VitalTalk, so something I've been involved with. You may be familiar with the physician and author Atul Gawande. So he developed he originally wrote about the checklist theory, this idea of how to approach complex problems, particularly in surgery. And then he took this approach to serious illnesses as well.
Jonathan, this is Heidi. Can I just interfere you for a second? On
Yes.
the right, on the presentation, there is some...
That better? Yeah. Is that better now, Heidi?
Much better. Perfect now. Thank you, and excuse me. Continue.
Yeah, that's okay. I was hoping it wouldn't block anything, but it was a way of my keeping some of the videos there. But Thank you for telling me. So this is the Serious Illness Conversation Guide. And so this is Atul Gawande's approach to, they tested this language with patients and families and figured out, okay, well, here's kind of a guide that clinicians could use for how to go through these conversations. And I'm going to introduce you to the guide. And it's been tested. We know that these conversations really don't take very long, on average about 14 minutes. And clinicians, a high number of them accepted use of this and found it to be quite easy and feasible. And clinicians who use the guide did a better job of being able to elicit patients' values and goals. Patients also reported meaningful behavior change, giving them time to think about things, make decisions, feeling more prepared, talking about what's most important to them a little bit more with their family. So this is the Serious Illness Conversation Guide, and it allows clinicians to respond with more empathy, ask more questions, and explore more values. So it's a framework that we're going to use, and I think you may be able, if not the actual guide itself, you may be able to extract some skills that you can use moving forward. Think about it as a recipe, whether it was for sourdough bread or apple pie. The recipe may help you to where to start, but then gradually over time, you kind of make it your own. So I think it would be useful to have the guide next to you as I'm talking. And what I'm going to go through is just the different elements of this. What you see is this, there's a different parts to this, the Serious Illness Conversation Guide. There's the setup where you're just opening up the conversation, then assessing for understanding, finding out what people have heard, what have they been told from providers in the past, and then sharing some sort of information with them to make sure that everybody gets onto the same page, right? And the guide offers some basic prognostic information that's not specific to a disease, but we'll talk about what that can look like, even for patients, team members upstream. When the prognosis may not be so clear, we can still share some concerns. Then we're going through, before coming up with a plan, we actually take a step back and say, all right, given this information about where things are with your illness, what's most important to you? What are you hoping for? What are you worried about? And then we explore what abilities that somebody would be deemed to be most important to them and what trade-offs they'd be willing to make. Like, how much are they willing to go through for the sake of more time? And only then, once we have an idea what's important to somebody, can we let those values be the pillar of the plan that we make moving forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of these parts in a little bit more detail. So the setup, here what we're doing is we're introducing the idea of having this conversation, asking permission to make sure that now is a good time to do so, and maybe even alluding to what's the benefit. So here's some language that is suggested. I'd like to talk to you today about what could be ahead with your health or your loved one's health, and do some thinking in advance about what's important to you so that we can make sure that we provide you with the care that they would want. Is this okay? Is this now an okay time? So what you've done is, again, you've introduced the idea of this conversation. You've asked permission, which is a way of giving agency to the patient or family to say, okay, is now a good time? And you've said why you're doing this, right? Because I want to make sure that you get the care that aligns with what's most important to you. We have a default pathway in at least our health system where people come to the health system looking for longevity, right? Next treatment, next treatment. But with that really is a default pathway. And we want to make sure that patients have an opportunity to decide along the way what kind of care they want. So that's what this setup is. We're telling them why and making sure it's all right. Then the first question that we want to ask them is, what have the doctors told you about where you are with your health? Now, you may see on the guide that you have, it may say, what's your understanding now of where you are? I don't like the word, what's your understanding, because then the patient may feel like I'm testing them. I want to know what they've told you. What have you heard? Couple reasons why that's important. Firstly, it tells me where I need to begin, right? In terms of sharing information. What do they know already? Secondly, the language that somebody uses to describe what they've been told can really be helpful in assessing their health literacy. If somebody says, yeah, well, they rubbed something on my chest and they told me that my heart wasn't really pumping very well, that's different than they said, well, they did an echocardiogram and told me my ejection fraction was 15%. So again, it helps to give you an insight to their degree of health literacy, that may impact the language that you use. You should always be looking to avoid medical jargon with most patients, but this may just help as a reminder to you. You could ask further, how much information about what's likely to be ahead with your illness? What do you want to hear from you? Some people will say, well, I want to know everything. And then somebody else may say, well, am I going to make it to my daughter's wedding, right? Some people may have very specific questions. And then asking again permission, would it be okay if I shared some of my understanding of the situation? So then you want to be sharing prognosis. We talk about that as the tell or the headline. Now, why do I say headline? Because if you think about a headline from a newspaper, it talks about the information and its importance, the data and its meaning, right? The Berlin Wall falls signals the end of communism, right? So, okay, you want those two bits of information. So it can't just be, well, the CT scan shows that the cancer is getting bigger. Okay, right? So what's the significance of that? Well, it means that chemotherapy is not working, or that we've run out of treatments that are going to reverse this, right? So that's what the headline is. We suggest using words like I'm worried or I'm concerned as the beginning of those statements, because they provide some alignment with the patient. And now, if you look on your guide, we really offered 3 different kinds of prognostic statements. One would be something that is based on time, right? I wish we were not in a situation. I'm worried that time may be short. And you could say as short as, days to weeks, weeks to months, months to a year. So in palliative care, we really use those brackets. And if we have time, I could tell you about how poorly physicians do at prognosticating. Just know that we're overly optimistic and consistently so. But one kind of prognostic statement you could offer is around time. Another could be around function, right? Which could be, I hope this is not the case, and I'm worried that this may be as strong as you're going to feel, that things are likely to get more difficult from here. And so you can imagine this for somebody with COPD or heart failure, that you could say, or even cancer, saying that this is as strong as you're going to feel. Things are likely to get worse. And then some uncertainty. It can be difficult to predict what will happen with your illness. I hope you'll continue to live well for a long time. And I'm worried that you could get sick quickly. And I think it's important to prepare for the possibility. So just the idea that there's some uncertainty and things could change. So it's useful to think about, before you go into to talk with a patient and family, what kind of information are you prepared to share? What kind of prognostic statement would you think about? What would be most appropriate? Offering one about time or function or uncertainty, and have that headline in your mind. Once you give that headline, you should know that that's going to bring on emotion, and that is going to happen faster than rational thinking. And it means that they've heard the headline. So it's a natural response, involuntary, unstoppable. And it can look like different things. It could be something nonverbal, where somebody just gets quiet, puts their head down, or maybe even starts to cry. It could be some verbal statements, say, no, this can't be. Oh, this is terrible. And then some of the more challenging ones are emotions that are masked as a cognitive question. What I mean by that is where someone says, wait, why didn't the medicine work? Or wait, how did we get to this point? Right? Wait, what are you saying there's nothing else to do? So I want you to recognize that sometimes when those questions come out, as clinicians, we jump right away to try and answer them with more information. If you take away nothing from today, I'd like you to remember that sometimes questions actually are an emotion. There's an affective element, and that you need to respond to that first in order to get at what's behind that emotion, what they're hoping for, worried about. And if you try and explain cognitive information when somebody's in an emotional state, they're just going to hear wah, 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 wah. It's kind of like the Peanuts cartoons when the teacher or the parent is talking. They're not getting that. They're not hearing it. They're not taking it in when they are in an emotional state. So just responding to the question as if it's a request for more information can often be a real pitfall. So how do you respond to that emotion? With empathic continuers. And this is an acronym that I offer. It's not on the Serious Illness Conversation Guide, but it should be on one of these other handouts I gave you, this NURSE acronym. The point is that you need to be prepared to respond with emotion. It's almost like what I think about as an interstitial skill, a skill that to use in between steps of the guide, okay? Is this responding to emotion? You could try naming what you see. Sounds like you're frustrated, or I can see that you're a bit overwhelmed right now. Offering an understanding or acknowledgement statement. Again, I don't say the word understand, oh, I understand, because you can't understand what this person's going through, and that's going to get thrown back at you. So I think about it as acknowledgement, but acknowledge wouldn't work in the acronym because then it would be NARS instead of nurse. Nurse works much better. So I can't imagine how difficult this is, right? This is clearly hard. Some sort of acknowledgement of what the situation is. A respect or praising statement. I can see you really care about your son, or you've really been working hard to do everything the doctors have asked of you. It's clear that you want to make sure that your father gets the best possible care. Supportive statements. We're in this together. No matter how this goes, we're going to continue to help you figure out what next steps are. Or an explore statement. Tell me more about that. Help me understand a little bit more about what you're thinking about. So the NURSE acronym is a way of cataloging different ways of responding with empathy to emotion. So it helps, I think of them as empathic continuers. You get more information from the patient. It's almost an advanced form of history taking, if you will, to get at what is driving the patient's response. What are they hoping for? What are they worried about? One other tool, I wish statements. I wish this wasn't so hard. I wish I had better news to share. I wish you were able to be here in the hospital with him. You don't say the second part, which is that, but I don't, or but I can't. That's implied, right? So this is a way of aligning with somebody, but recognizing the gravity of what they're feeling, the I wish statement. So you've responded to the emotion. You've shared, let me say you've asked what they've heard. You've shared some prognostic information. You've really done a great job of seeing the emotional response, acknowledging it. How do you know that you're ready to move forward in the conversation? Their emotion level might decrease. They sigh, they sit back in their chair, they look at you again, ready to move on. Sometimes they ask, this time differently, in a different tone, what comes next, right? Before they may have said, wait, isn't there something else to do? And now they come back to you and say, so really, doc, what else can we do? Well, if you're not sure, this is a powerful tool. Ask to make sure you get the care you want. It would help to take a step back and hear a little bit more from you about what's important to you. Would that be okay now? Would now be an okay time to talk about what next steps could be? Here, I think about this permission asking as a way of taking somebody's emotional temperature. When you ask permission, you're checking in with somebody. If you get anything other than a yes, oh, I just didn't think we would be at this point, then you know you're still in emotion land, which one of my colleagues called America's least favorite amusement park. So if you're still in emotion land, you need to stay with those nurse statements, right? Those ways of responding with empathy. Stay in that place with the patient responding to their emotion, because look, sometimes you've shared information that's quite shocking or overwhelming, and they need more time to process it. So when you ask permission, you give agency back to the patient, control over the conversation, and you're checking in about their emotional state. Recognize that this may not happen in one conversation, right? Sometimes all you're doing is sharing news, and that's as far as you're going to get. When you're working with a surrogate, right, another member of the family, perhaps they're a patient that can't talk to us because they're intubated or they lack capacity from cognitive impairment, you may want to say, bring the patient's voice to the room. If your father could see this and understood the situation, what would be his reaction? And sometimes that's an emotional process for a family member to go through. All right, so now you've asked, would it be okay if we talk about next steps? The family says, yes, that would be great. All right, before we do that, it would help for me to learn a little bit more about what's important to you in the face of this information. What are your most important goals or hopes if your situation should worsen, or given what's going on? What are your biggest fears or worries about getting sicker? What gives you strength as you think about the future with your illness? So these hopes and worries are really the key pillars, key foundation. What are you hoping for, right? Some people may say more time, or some people may say, I want to be home with my kids, right? Or I'm hoping this, for this to to get cured, or people have different hopes. And sometimes you need to follow it up with, what else are you hoping for? Anything else, because they may have more than one thing that they're hoping for. And then the counterbalance is, what are they worried about? I'm worried about feeling short of breath or something like that. So their hopes, their worries, their strengths. What are some critical abilities in your life that you can't imagine living without that? And for some people will say, well, I want to be able to communicate with my family, or I want to be able to take care of myself, or I just want to be able to hit the remote of the TV, right? So it's going to be different for everybody, and you need to approach it without judgment. Trade-offs. If you became sicker, how much are you willing to have invasive things done to you that might or might not help, right? How much are you willing to go through is another way that's phrased on the conversation guide. Right? Some people would say, well, I'm okay for you to try some of those aggressive things, but if it looks like I'm just going to be stuck on machines, I don't want to stay that way. How much are you willing to go through? And then checking in, how much does your family know about your priorities and wishes? Right? A key step is for patients to share with their family what is most important to them, so that if they ever get to a place where they're not able to speak, that somebody can bring their voice to the room. So when people respond to these questions, really what they say ends up falling into one of three buckets. Usually it's around longevity, function, or comfort. When we're doing well, we want to live as long as possible, do the things we want to do, and feel comfortable doing that. Right? But when diseases advance, we sometimes have to make priorities, prioritize one thing over another. Like, how much am I willing to go through and experience for the sake of prolonging my life, right? Maybe I've reached some point where, it's more important for me to be at home, even if it means less time, or it's more important for me to be out of pain, right? Even if it means that I'm not as awake or not as able to do the things that I want to do. So again, trying to find out what is somebody's priority in the face of the news that you've shared. Once you've done that great work, which is really driven by your curiosity, right? You want to get to know this individual that you are working with. Then you're finally at a place where you can try and make a recommendation. First, I say use alignment statements. So it sounds like what I hear you saying is that you're really willing to go through a lot more for the sake of more time. Or it sounds like, what's important to you right now is just to get your pain under control and to just feel better. And that way the patient knows that you've heard it correctly. You're checking in with them. And then you can make a recommendation. And the way to do so is connect the dots and just like in math class, show your work. What do I mean by that? Because you've told me this is what's important to you, here's what I'm going to recommend, right? Because you've told me X, I would suggest Y. And check in, how does that sound to you? And lastly, close it with a commitment saying, all right, no matter how this goes, I'm going to continue to work with you to do next steps to figure out how we can help you all throughout this. So this is the guide. Have it by your side. We've got responding to emotion, exploring questions, asking permission to move forward. We didn't talk about bookmarking, but what that is if somebody brings up, can you tell me about the medicines that will help to keep me from getting short of breath? When you're trying to get through this conversation, maybe bookmark and say, okay, it sounds like that's important to you. Can we put that aside for a moment? Let's finish this conversation, and then we'll come back to that. Would that be okay? So that is a way of trying to get through these important conversations without getting sidelined by a number of side issues, but acknowledging that those are important. So avoid the a la carte menu where you're just offering a list of treatments. You want to make sure you're agreeing about what the goals are and then coming up with a recommendation based on that, focusing on what can be achieved and being clear about what you don't suggest as well. And now what I'd like to do is just show you a demonstration of this conversation happening. And let me stop sharing that for the moment. share again with Optimize. Okay, I've done that. All right, here we go.
Hi, Mr. Jackson. It's good to see you virtually like this.
Yeah.
How are you? How are you feeling?
Hi. You know, I've been better, but I'm feeling good. If you know, like, yeah, I'm out of hospital, and so that's good.
Yeah.
So overall, I'm doing all right.
Amen. Well, and then how was it being in the hospital this last time?
I didn't like it. I just didn't like being there. You know, people are fine, doctors, nurses.
Yeah.
But I'm not complaining too much.
That's fair. Well, listen, I'd like to talk about what is ahead with your illness and have us do some thinking in advance about what's important to you so that I can make sure that we provide you with the care you want. Would that be okay?
Oh my, let's see. Could we maybe wait on that a little? You know, maybe a little later. Okay.
We could. I would like to talk about it today. I am trying to do this with all my patients, and I like to try to do it at a time when they're actually feeling better. And because it's hard to have these conversations, you know, when you're feeling really sick.
Right. That makes sense. Okay.
All right. Thanks. Well, so my first question is what is your understanding now of where you are with your illness?
Well, I have bad lungs, and they're not going to get better. I just hope they stay the same, maybe. But that's what I got. I got bad lungs.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, how much information about what is likely to be ahead with your illness would you like from me?
Everything. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I want to share with you my understanding of where things are with your illness. I'll say it can be difficult to predict what's going to happen with lung disease. I hope that you will continue to live well for a long time. Like, that's the goal. But I'm also worried that you could get really sick really quickly. And I think it's important to prepare for that possibility.
Oh, man. You mean like, you're talking about if if it gets worse and stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, brother. Wow.
You know, this is hard to think about and hard to talk about it.
Yeah. But we got to do what we got to do. We got to talk about it. So, okay, I'm game.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. What are your most important goals if your health situation worsens?
What do you mean? Like,
well, for example, for some people, their work is their most important thing.
Oh, yeah. My family.
Mm-hmm.
My family.
Yep.
If I had to say, I guess, number one goal, see my grandson graduate from high school. He's supposed to graduate next year.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
He's a
huge.
good boy. Yeah. He's a good boy.
Yeah. Yes. So that's exactly what I'm looking for. Well, and then what are your biggest fears and worries about the future with your health?
Having my wife see me suffer. I've been thinking about that a lot.
Mm.
And I'm not looking forward to suffocating. You know?
All right.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Actually, you know, it's great you still have your sense of humor. I would like to come back to that subject later, because I think there's a lot of things that we can do to put a plan in place to really help prevent you from feeling like you're suffocating. But
yeah.
Do you mind if we kind of finish this line of questions first?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, great. What gives you strength as you think about the future with your illness?
I look to God as I lead my life. I'm not a big churcher, but I do look to God, and that helps me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, And then what abilities are so critical to your life that you can't imagine living without them?
Like what?
Well, a mentor of mine, her father told her that as long as he could sit in his easy chair, watch football on TV, and eat chocolate ice cream, then he was good.
Excuse me. Yeah, I like that. That's funny. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I would like to be able to take care of myself. I mean, physically take care of myself, you know, by myself, like a bathroom and wash myself and stuff. That's a big thing for me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, if you became sicker, how much are you willing to go through for the possibility of gaining more time?
Oh, you mean like what kind of medical stuff I would be willing to?
Yeah, for example.
Yeah, right. Well, that's a tough one because a couple of times ago, as you know, I was in the ICU, and I don't know that I want to go through that again. But at the same time, I got out of it, so I'm not sure. That's a tough one to answer.
Yeah. Well, actually, just me hearing that you've had that experience and you're a little bit on the fence now is really helpful. I don't think we have to make a decision about that today, but it's really helpful for me to know that about you.
Okay, good. Good.
How much does your family know about your priorities and wishes, the stuff we've been talking about?
You know, that's a good question. I've tried not to, upset my wife and even my kids. They're adults, they're all, but I don't want them to worry too much, so I haven't really talked about it with them. Yeah.
Well, let me see. Let me try and summarize what I heard you say, and you can correct me if I get something not quite right. But what I heard you say was really the important things for you are your family, seeing your grandson graduate from high school, not seeing your wife see you suffer, that it's important for you to feel like you can take care of yourself physically, and that you've had this experience of being in the ICU and are not decided yet maybe about whether you'd want to go through that again.
Yeah.
I think keeping all that in mind and what we know about your illness, I'd recommend that we have another one of these conversations and maybe bring your wife into the loop. What I'm thinking is one way that we can make this easier for her and both of you is really to have her hear kind of what's important to you and what the plan is so that when things happen, she doesn't panic. And I think that'll really help us make sure that your treatment plans reflect what is important to you also. How does that plan seem to you?
That makes sense to me, Doctor. I think it might help her. And I think she would like that.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And I want you to know I'll do everything I can to help you through this.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I'd like to come back to the...
Well, cut that off. Hold on a second. Okay. All right. So we're going to do exactly that. Just for a moment, I'd like y'all to share or take a moment and just write down what about that conversation might have been different than the way you normally would do things or echoes something that you would do with patients. And I'd like you to write that down. And then in a second, we're going to go around and maybe I'll ask you to turn on your cameras so we can see. And I'd like everybody to introduce themselves just by stating their name and where you are practicing, what your role is there. And then just a follow-up, really just one sentence, okay, about what you noticed in that resonated with you as being something a little bit different than what you've done, or supports something that you do already in conversations with patients or families, okay? And I'll start again, I'm Dr. Jonathan Fisher. I'm a family physician by training, but do hospice and palliative care at Duke. I do inpatient hospital consults for palliative care and work at our hospice facility as well. And I also work for our population health management office at Duke. I love teaching the guide in particular because, again, it gives people some structure to a conversation. So I think it can be helpful with that. So I'm just going to start calling out folks by the order in which I see them on my screen. So maybe, is it Sharon or Sharon Mann?
Yes, hi. I was just writing that. I'm a coordinator in the Foreign Affairs Unit at Galley Medical Center, and I work with Aya Kagata. So I'm not a caretaker, but as a daughter whose mother passed away from cancer after serious illness and hospice care, finding this to be absolutely very interesting and moving, and thank you for this on behalf of the medical profession and patients.
Great. And thank you so much. Lori Sadler?
Hello. I am actually a pediatrician and clinical geneticist in Buffalo. And many of my sort of end of life conversations have to revolve around infants and newborns. So really sharing that information with families and helping them to try to make decisions about level of care in kids with lethal disorders, for example, as well as folks that receive serious genetic news later in life. And while I always ask about sort of what their expectations of the exchange is and what their level of understanding is, I haven't really been super specific about worries and strengths, and that I think that would be very helpful.
Thank you. Shemesh?
Hi, so I'm myself, I'm from Budapest. I'm part of the medical team of the partnership. I'm the CEO of the Jewish Hospital here in Budapest, where I a little bit less deal with patient. I'm also, I work also in the ER as medical doctor. We have less time to talk to the patients, and you try to talk to the families, but you don't have so much time, especially under the COVID. Yeah, this will be the optimal way to talk to them, but it's sometimes far away from the reality, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is useful to think about how you can concentrate these conversations and still get at, how much are you willing to go through, right? So that way you don't follow a default pathway. But yeah, that is one of the challenging situations. Thank you. Gil?
Gil Wolf. I'm a neurologist. I run the department here at the University of Buffalo. So my whole career, I've been in academic neurology. I'm a neuromuscular neurologist. And I used to deal with kids some. I don't anymore. But I always found these conversations, especially in relation to bad muscular dystrophies and spinal muscular atrophy, very, very difficult. But I still have to do it with ALS. And I've been doing that for 30 years. The video had some elements of things that I've encountered, but mostly not. ALS is a pretty well understood entity by families once the diagnosis is made. I mean, everybody knows about Lou Gehrig in the United States. It's only called Lou Gehrig's disease in the United States, by the way, because Lou Gehrig is unknown in other parts of the world. But yeah, I mean, there are elements there, and it's still, even after 30 years, I mean, I have a certain approach that integrate some of the things that were mentioned. But it's always a difficult situation. Fortunately, we have some time usually, not always, but usually it's not something that's in the next month or two, but in the next few years, you know, so we can have kind of these tiered conversations over the first 3 or 4 visits.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the work you do, Gil. Actually, my mother died of ALS, which was probably one of the experiences that I had with good and poor communication, both ends of the spectrum. And yeah, those are still difficult conversations we have with patients, particularly around artificial forms of respiratory support, use of Trilogy machines, and how long people stay on those types of things. Yeah.
You can mention most of us know this. You can mention the Japanese experience, which has completely changed in the last 20 years, because they used to put on invasive mechanical ventilation all of their ALS patients, which really is not a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And then when there's Stephen Hawking issues that come up, because everybody knows about Stephen Hawking, I can explain that. I actually met Stephen Hawking, but the special kind of things that the UK government was doing for him, which most people don't have access to.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's a challenging disease to navigate, and it's useful to walk that path with patients all throughout it. Let me see where I'm at. Letter. You're still muted.
It's Norbert.
Norbert, but you're still muted. Try hitting your space bar, if nothing else. There you go.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Now we hear you, very good.
Thanks. So Norbert is my name. I'm an anesthetist by training, and I work in the Hungarian Jewish Hospital, mainly geriatrics and hospice services. I found it very helpful and interesting what you said. And I was wondering if, you know, some similar approach could be used in the pediatric population. Do you think it's viable? And the other one is, you're watching the video where the doctor suggested to introduce the patient's wife to the discussion. In my experience, and in Hungary, it would be very difficult to arrange for that. I would rather trust the patient to talk to his wife first, discuss it, and maybe then bring up the issue of doing you know, a mutual conversation like the 3 of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those things differ by society, by culture, or even by individual relationships, right? Some individuals want to pull in family members early, and others don't want them in at all. And there's definitely, we obviously have a few folks that deal mostly with pediatric patients. There's some elements of this that are still relevant, right, in dealing with the families around this, and particularly the communication skills around recognizing the emotion and exploring values are important steps, no matter who you're dealing with there.
But then with the pediatrics, you know, it's very difficult what you tell the patient. What you tell the patient without the parent being there, or if the parent is there, because of the children's rights, you know.
Right. And it changes depending on the age of the patient too, right? Their capacity for decision making.
It is very difficult.
Thank you so much. Stephen Stone?
I am now unmuted. I'm actually a retired dermatologist, professor emeritus at SIU School of Medicine. I still go in occasionally as a locum tenens for colleagues who are on vacations. But at this stage in my life, I have to admit I'm closer to being on the receiving end of that conversation than the giving end. And of course, in dermatology, I have very little experience, actually probably none since my residency, with end-of-life issues, because as our patients reach that situation, they're usually primarily dealing with an oncologist or a rheumatologist who's just sort of turfed the skin issues to us, but not the detailed patient management.
Well, thank you for joining us. Is it Avia?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm the palliative nurse in the Galil Medical Center. We do use the format of conversation like you showed. But the problem is, like you said in the beginning, very little referrals to palliative care or very late referrals to palliative care. That's the main problem. But when we do have the conversation, we have good ones.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gabriella?
Hi, I'm working in the Budapest Jewish Hospital with Asaf and Norbert, and I'm working in ambulance cars. So it's very different type. And it's a very interesting topic because in Hungary, for a long time, we didn't tell anything to the patient about his or her very serious condition. We talked about it only with the relatives. So it's relatively new topic in Hungary to talk to the patient about it. So I think we don't have a lot of we don't know exactly how to tell it. So we need to learn it now. I think. So it's very useful for me.
Very good. I think there are cultural differences, degrees to which the patient autonomy is at the center versus we're talking to family members, and it's often a cultural landscape that we have to be prepared to navigate with different families.
So in ambulance cars, we have a lot of times when we learn that the patient doesn't know anything about his illness. So we have to tell him or tell the relatives. So it's hard. It's very hard, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yael Sipora Sabo?
She's working now, so she can.
Okay. She still has her she's still logged in, even though she's not by her camera. Okay. Howard Chodash?
Hello. I'm Howard Chodash. I'm a gastroenterologist in Springfield, Illinois. I'm only practicing part-time these days, mostly from home. I'm doing virtual consults. But through my career, I had to deal with a lot of end-of-life care with chronic liver patients, chronic pancreatitis patients, and even inflammatory bowel disease. And there are difficult conversations to have. And like you had mentioned earlier, it's always hard to predict. People always say, well, how much longer do I have? And I said, that's a TV type thing, a Hollywood type thing where they say, oh, you've got a week or 2 weeks. That's the most difficult conversation with the patients because you never know. I've seen some liver patients that you think are only going to live a few months and live for 10 years. And you have others that look really healthy one minute and then the next minute they're gone. So it's always a difficult conversation. And that's why when I do have some of these chronic liver patients, especially we need to talk about liver transplant or whether it's even an option or not. It's a conversation that needs to be had with some of these patients to know, especially what their long-term goals are. You'll sometimes have patients that are, wanting a liver transplant, but they're still drinking or they're still using medications that they shouldn't be using. And you have to explain to them that in order to try to meet their goals, they have to try to get off of these issues, and they're difficult issues in their own right. So You know, I appreciate what you're saying. It's starting the conversation is the important part, but where to go from it, it's very difficult at times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are challenges along the way, whether it's initiating it or people, as you say, sometimes having unrealistic expectations of, all right, I want a liver transplant, but I also want to keep on drinking. So it becomes a problem. Very good. Thank you so much. Anka Libovici? No, there, Anka? Anka?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Do you hear?
Yes, yes.
Hello. I'm a neurologist and oncologist. In fact, I deal most with neuro-oncology. It is a very difficult profession. I see young people with glioblastoma, and you see the end from the beginning.
Yeah.
And every time it's difficult to deal with this and to sell them a lot of hope, even if the prognostic of the disease is awful.
Yeah.
Full of hope and full of sadness all the time.
Yeah.
I'm very happy when I deal with breast cancer or other things that I can breathe, me and my patients.
Certainly in oncology, there's a wide variation of prognoses, and some of the times one of the hardest situations is when we know that somebody's prognosis is very poor right from the beginning, to think about, all right, how can we support hope? And I think about it as expanding the portfolio of hope, right? What else, besides hoping for more time, what else can we hope for, right? What other things can we hope for with the time that we have? And sometimes our job is to help people to focus on what is still doable, right? What are the things that can be meaningful for them with the time that they have? So, well, thank you for your work, and thank you for participating today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. I've done my best to catch everybody. I thought maybe I missed Lisa. Did I do? Lisa Klein there. Okay. If there's anybody else that I missed, please speak up.
Hello, I'm Lisa Klein. I'm a pediatric cardiologist in Louisville, Kentucky, on the staff at Norton Children's Medical Group Heart Institute and the faculty of the U of L School of Medicine. And I take care of patients from womb to tomb, as we say. We do prenatal diagnosis of congenital heart disease with fetal echocardiography, and I'm on the fetal cardiology team. And then we also take care of patients all through childhood, adolescence, and adulthood with congenital heart disease. So we see a very broad spectrum of disease, and much of it is luckily not associated with end-of-life care, but the complex defects that we diagnose prenatally involve a discussion prenatally about whether to even continue the pregnancy, let alone what would be involved once the child is born and all of the steps along the way. So we do have conversations that are quite similar to what Dr. Fisher has discussed, but luckily it's not all that frequent. And it's challenging every time, no matter how you slice it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lots of difficult news to share. My father used to say, no monopoly on Cirrus. So, Anka, I'm sorry, I missed where were you calling in from?
Sorry, once again?
Where are you located? Where are you practicing?
In Israel.
In Israel?
Naria, Galilee Medical Center.
Okay, thank you.
Your partner.
All right, I missed that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think I've gotten everybody, right? Thank you all so much for participating. And by this time, if not before, you should have gotten an email from Heidi Benish that included some attachments, right? There's the serious illness conversation guide, what I was introducing to the various parts of. right? And there's also the nurse acronym, a handout that kind of details the different parts of that. And then lastly, this is what we're going to do now with some instructions about role play. And so what I'm going to do is just read off instructions. We're going to end up breaking you up into some breakout groups of like 3 people to a room, 2 or 3, I don't know where we are with the numbers, how that evenly lays out. And really the idea is just to try and practice using the guide to see how it feels, right? I don't really, they don't pay me anymore if you use the guide or not. Okay, so I'm not trying to sell you on this guide. Really the idea is that you have a tool that may be useful for you that reminds you about certain questions you may be able to ask a patient, right? That and the nurse acronym, I think, are useful tools. So what you will see is in the instructions that, again, this should be email attachments. If you've had a chance to print it out, that's even easier, but if not, you can do it. You'll go into your group. The person whose name, whose last name starts with the first, if you go in alphabetical order, the person whose name you would get to first, you are going to be the clinician in that situation, right? All right. The next person in the alphabetical order, you are going to be the patient. All right. And so what you're going to do is you're going to do one case, depending upon which, if you are in room, how many rooms are we going to have, Heidi?
We're supposed to do 5 rooms, but now I just see like also Stephen, also a staff, they are leaving. So we will still divide them. And if there's somebody who is just in one room on their own, please come back to the big room again, and we will divide you into others. I don't know exactly if everybody goes to a room right now.
Okay, so if your room number, I only need to do 1 case, right? There's 3 cases in the material that I sent, right? But if you are in room 1, do case 1. If you are in room 2, do case 2. If you are in 3, do case 3. I think that should cover everybody, right? And so if you are the clinician, right, just read the information about the patient, right? If you are the patient, what you are given is a line-by-line response. So when the clinician goes through the questions from the guide, there you have a basis for how to respond, right? And you can, if you're a closeted thespian, an actor waiting to be, you can, bring the emotion to it that you would as an actor. Okay, so you've got the scripts there, and then if you was a third person in the room, you are the observer, right? And there's an observer form that you can just check off. So that way you can give feedback about what you noticed about the conversation, what worked well, what you thought was interesting. And certainly you'll have time to go through it at least once, right? Where there's 1 clinician, 1 patient, 1 observer. And if you are able to do that by 11:30, so in 15 minutes or less, then maybe you could try it a second time. And if we're running out of time, we'll bring you back. It's okay. So just try and go certainly through it once and discuss it. If you have time to start another, switch roles, right? And let the observer be the clinician, and let the clinician be the patient, and the patient becomes the observer, right? So what we will do is put you in breakout rooms, and I may come popping around to breakout rooms just to answer any questions and see how it's going. You don't have to stop, I'll be a fly on the wall. And again, just try out saying the word, see how it feels, and then we'll come back and discuss how it went, okay? So I think Heidi is going to use the magic of breakout rooms and send us away, and you'll be asked to join a room.